In this video, I would like to quickly repeat what we learned in the first material video and then go a little bit more in detail. So here I have a sphere and it uses a diffuse material. Here's my material output. This element defines what type of material I am working with. This defines what to render. You see this one is being plugged in here. This is diffuse, so this is matte. If I would like this one to be, let's say, metallic, a very simple way to do this, not necessarily correct, but the quickest way would be to switch this one to glossy. And you see then the object is totally reflective. And then with the roughness, I can, for example, decide how polished or perfect that surface is. And you see the more I increase the roughness, the more the surface gets blurred. And now this, for example, doesn't really look like polished chrome anymore, more maybe some sort of sandblasted reflective material. So what I would like to reinforce with this one is that we don't really create materials based on, let's say, wood, metal, or plastic. We simply work with building blocks like glossy, or for example, where's diffuse? Diffuse for a matte surface. And then if we need something to be combined, we mix it. So let's do this again. Shift A, mixer, and then I plug this one in here, plug this one to there, push this one to there. And there you see I'm mixing 50% of diffuse or 100% diffuse or 100% glossy. So this is kind of like a slider. And then if we would like to have something more physically accurate, Shift A, input, Fresnel, plug this Fresnel into the factor, and then it mixes the diffuse with the glossy. Now the order actually, which one you use, is also important. You see now the center is metallic, the outside is diffuse. And now we see more the reflection on the outside, while at the center we see more the diffuse material. If I remove this one, for example, you can study actually the effect of this Fresnel effect really well. See, the more I increase this one, the more saturated the perpendicular part of my shader gets. Now sometimes this is a little bit tricky for somebody to understand why to do this, and this is actually very easy to explain. So let me pause the rendering. Okay, so we have this mix shader, and let's think about how we build a car. How we paint a car. For example, you have your metal. Then we put a layer of diffuse material, like a primer, and then later we add a layer of clear coat, glossy. So this is maybe step 2, this is step 1. Okay. Now think about diffuse, step 1, and glossy, step 2. And this mix shader here, the first one is 1, the second one is 2. If we would write this one down as a formula, it would be like 1, let's say, multiplied by 2 equal, the equal is, for example, coming out here, and then how we operate or combine or mix 1 with 2. That, for example, is our factor. So here we say mix diffuse with glossy, and the factor, what we do with them, how we mix we simply use the Fresnel code to blend outside being more reflectivity, perpendicular being less reflectivity. And this way, for example, you can quickly create materials, for example, which are colored. So we change the diffuse material to give it the color, and then the glossy we keep white. That's kind of like the clear coat or the clear white reflection on top. And then with the roughness, we can define if something is clear coated or kind of like matte. And then with the Fresnel, we define how the reflection works. In case you would like to simulate the effect of a three-dimensional structure, we're going to hit some of the limitation in computer graphics because our computer model, as we can see, is a really simplified geometry. And to generate, or for example, to render accurately bumps or dents or three-dimensional structure, we would need a three-dimensional model for that, which is possible, but extremely labor and memory intensive and also not very flexible. So in computer graphics, we use a texture approach to use a texture to, for example, simulate a structure. And let me show you how that works. So I'm going to add texture, and for example, I use noise. Let's put this one to here and plug the color into the color input so we see actually what this does. So that's the way how noise looks like. It's a math function that simply creates a noise pattern. With scale, we can change the scale, make it big or small. So you see what I have to adjust the scale based on the size of my object. Can detail simplify it with distortion. Again, for example, add, well, so it says distortion, you see, looks like an oil film. And that's when we go back to here. Now we see, because this is a math function and not an image from Photoshop, it perfectly flows around our object. We do not see anywhere any seam or gaps. This is like a perfect flow. So what we can do, we can use this texture and put this, for example, into displacement. So if I put this one in there, you see what the shader is doing. Those two mixed together, put into the surface, show you how the material should look like. And this displacement kind of like deals with how to roughen up the three-dimensional object, and it creates visually an illusion of hills and valleys, so it casts highlights and shadows. I mean, you see that, for example, here, but if you take a look at the edge, you still see my sphere. So this is a visual trick. Now you see the effect is also pretty big. So to scale the effect, I could go to add and then go to converter, math, and I plug this one in between and set this one to multiply. Now this sounds a little bit odd, but basically what I'm doing here is say the output of this texture, the image, multiply by a value of 0.5 and plug this in. If I set this one to 0, you see I say whatever this one, multiply with 0, which means nothing. If I type in 0.01, you see there's a very subtle effect. If I type in 0.1, it's stronger, and it looks too strong. 0.001, it's there, but you hardly can notice it. You can see that these highlights are, for example, not correct. They're like distorted. 0.05. So here you can work with really small value increases. Maybe the scale would change, or increase. And there you see now, this is actually really quite nice how the highlights are broken apart. So like a smooth surface and for example a surface that is roughened up. And that's for example how you could easily simulate something that's plastic and has a bump texture to it. Now there are actually different math codes. For example, here we have this one. That's for example how it looks, kind of like a cell structure. So if we use this one and plug it in, maybe here, there you see, looks like it's hammered. So if for example this should be metal, like let's say a really quick one, there's our glossy surface, which is a little bit hammered. Let's make this slightly roughened up. And there. So you see here I just reconfigured my layout to quickly generate the result of a perfectly glossy material like metal. Added a little bit of blurriness through the roughness and then used this one to create this hammered look. Now let's say this should maybe be copper. One easy approach, like a shortcut, would simply to tint the color of the reflection. And there you see that everything is colored, but also we do not have like a pure white reflection anymore. But as a quick shortcut at the beginning, I think this is sufficient. Maybe brass. Yeah, brass is going to be a little bit more tricky. Maybe like this. Maybe let's take this one out. Okay. Let's put everything back where it was. And I hope that this actually demonstrated to you already that it doesn't really take a lot of work to create, for example, a paper material, a plastic material, or for example, a metal material. And then with the noise texture or the Voronoi texture and the multiply put into the displacement, we can then create really nice, interesting structures. But there's a lot more we can do with those textures. I can plug them into displacement to create this three-dimensional illusion. But I, for example, can also do something like this. Just so you see what I'm going to do, I switched this one to cells, and then it creates those cells. Looks like a crystal structure. I can, for example, use that for the factor. And there you see again, and I'm blending between or mixing between my diffuse and my glossy based on the black and white and grayscale values of my procedural texture. Another funny one would be, let's say, we go to checker, make this one black there, put this one to there. There you see it, even cleaner. Go to 10, 20, there you see it. I could even use something like this, for example, for the reflectivity. So I put this one to there, so this is metal. Put this one into the roughness. And there you see everything that, for example, let's say, yep, everything that is white, for example, is very rough. Everything that's black has no roughness, so it's perfectly polished. There you see it better. So if you think about, for example, galvanized steel, you see very often there is a cell structure. Well, we can actually use this Voronoi go to cells. Let's actually for the moment see the size, how this one looks. Maybe 10, okay. And then I use the factor, go into the roughness, and take a look at that. And then you see already a surface, and that is metallic somewhat. It's reflective, but it's not a uniform blurriness among the reflections. So this actually looks pretty nice. Now this is not a perfect material yet, but I'm simply trying to introduce you to the really fundamental building blocks. And then in a last video, I will go more into details. And you see that most of the time I'm always dealing here with diffuse and glossy, mixer. So you see it's just a lot of repetitive task because every object has somewhere something diffuse, every object has somewhere maybe something reflective. So you just mix those elements all together. Let's see, what else do I have? Translucent. Okay. So let's say something should be translucent. Well, that is, for example, going to be very easy. Let's give this a translucent material. There. So what does translucent mean? You see, if, for example, we add a diffuse material and shut that one, you see more how light and shadows are casted. And with translucent, it seems, well, kind of, well, translucent. Now the nice thing about this engine is you can also mix kind of like translucent and glossy all together. So for example, I add myself a glossy material, and let's say this one should be this orange. Mix those two together, add a Fresnel there. And there you see now this doesn't look like glass, it looks really more like a translucent material. That's how easy it actually really is. Just mix all these parts together. Now if we would like to have something to look like glass, that's very easy. We just say glass, plug it in, and we're done. Can maybe change the color, can change the roughness. We can change maybe the index of reflection, so how much light is being bent. That's one of the easiest materials. If something should look perfectly transparent, well, we just use transparent. We can see through it. It's tinted, so you can see it's actually really there. But as you can see, it actually, the transparent compared to glass does not provide any light bending. Now let's see how we can actually take this diffuse material and turn it into, let's say, a glossy reflective material that has some sort of metallic flakes submerged inside the material. So maybe let's do it this way. Delete the diffuse. I add a glossy, duplicate it, add a mix shader, combine these two, bring it over. One, for example, is clear, one is roughed, and there we see now actually that this actually mixes together, kind of like the blurred shader and the clear shader. So this is a very simple and quick hack, for example, to do this. Now this one, maybe I want to give a little bit of color. Say like maybe this one. And now you see there's kind of like a bluish shimmer around the white light. Maybe let's see what we can do if we add maybe a Fresnel to that mix. See, this effect, Fresnel, really makes your materials look much, much better. And then with the roughness, you can, for example, decide how big this glow will be or how diffused it will be. Okay, that's, for example, a very simple start. Let's make this a little bit more interesting. This, I click and then say, please be diffuse. Where is diffuse? There. Okay, perfect. And I'm going to do the following. I'm going to press Shift A, color, mix RGB, and move this one to there. And for example, let's say maybe this deep blue, this deep magenta. And you see now I can blend between these two colors. And then if I maybe Shift A, layer weight. Layer weight is similar like Fresnel. We have the Fresnel and we have a facing. And with facing, if this is 0, you see the first one. If I set this one to 1, you see the other one. If I set this one to 0.5, you see now actually it works based on what how something is facing to you. So 50-50 right now. 0.25, you see I start to see only a quarter of the surface, kind of like the angle will be magenta, the rest remains blue. And you see this is actually a nice iridescent effect already. Now we are not really limited to one mix shader. Maybe this one I would like to be slightly glossy, so more roughed up. I can press this one, Shift D, move it and drag it onto there. This one, Shift D, move it, drag it to there, push this in, set this to 0, Shift D, copy this over, and take a look what we have. Now we have an iridescent base material with metal flakes inside. But it doesn't really look very good at the moment. So maybe we delete this one. Then ooh, we get this result, terrible. And then we can go input, texture, this Veronary, cell, and I set this one to maybe 200. And then I put the factor into the mix. And if I zoom in a little bit, you can see there's a texture happening. So maybe let's do this for the moment. So there we can see how this mixes between the diffuse and the glossy based on a texture. I can go to color, gamma, and gamma is kind of like, maybe think about like brightness. I changed the values, so you see I only have few of those dots for reflectivity. There, maybe 400 to make it finer. And then maybe here 0.2 to diffuse it a little bit. And there you see now I'm using this texture, and it really helps in creating more like a dot-like style. So this glossy material by itself will look like this. And then with the Veronary texture, see currently it actually looks like this. And then with the gamma, we just, you see it looks darker and you only have these few white dots, and these white dots are really important because they then only make a little bit of this glossy material visible. And it really looks like you have small metal flakes submerged. You see, this one already looks much better. So it's kind of like a trick with a texture, how to mix these two materials together. And then we mix another clear coat, no roughness, over it. Now to change this effect, maybe we can change the size. So I make the texture even finer, so I get maybe more flakes next to each other. If I make only 20, well, it looks more like galvanized steel below with something over it. So you see, just the size really helps making this look or perceive as dots. Okay, now this effect I can also apply what I did to the diffuse also to the glossy. So maybe here I take this one out. Actually, I take this one completely out, so this, you see it this way. And then actually I plug this one in there just for the color. And there you can actually see that the reflective parts have a color. 0.5, maybe see it better. Let's maybe make this one 4. Let's take this one out for the moment and put this one to there. And that didn't work really well. 0.2. Yeah, I guess I need to keep it or leave it that way. Well, you only see this reflection around where the light is. That's the reason why most of the time you don't really see these dots really well. So maybe what could help if I make this one white? Let's see. Nah, it's difficult to show that or this effect right now with the way how my lights are set up. This is actually maybe also a good example to show you that a lot of what you do is really subject to your material setup and your lights, because they interact with each other. Now I'm going to simply make a copy, plug this one in there, and maybe here, I don't know, let me give them some other colors. Well, there, that green, now you see that nicely to contrast against the blue. Now if the reflective flake has the same color as the blue background, obviously you can't see it. Let's see what happens if we increase this one. 0.5. What about 0? 0.2 seem to be a good compromise. Yeah. Okay. That's basically, let's leave it at this for the moment. Or for example, you can easily build an iridescent-like looking material that has some metal flakes. And this approach of mixing different glossy materials together, we for example can use to simulate something like anodized aluminum. So let's make a new material. This diffuse I turn into a glossy, make another glossy, Shift A, mix there and there. And I don't know, maybe let's select this color and this color, and then this is on top, that's on the bottom. So you see that one, for example, I could maybe diffuse a lot. 0.5. No, this is way too much. 0.2. Yeah. And then add, for example, a Fresnel. this is also too clean. Yeah, there it starts to actually look like something. So you see we have this material mixed with this one, different roughness values. Maybe this one I can brighten up a little bit, so the reflection color is a little bit wider, and then this glossy basically gives it the color tint, the underline. For example, pay attention to the reflection of the lights. They're totally colored, and the brighter I make the color, the brighter the reflection of a light source will be. And if this, for example, is too blurry, well, you know, you can also make this one 0.1, make this one 0.3, 0.4, 0.2. See there you have really a lot of flexibility with how you can mix those values. To bring all this to an end, I actually would like to go back to the bump mapping. And what you showed to you before was a really easy way how to generate a three-dimensional structure by using those procedural textures. But let's say you have a very specific pattern you would like to use, and then those procedural textures, as long as you do not know how to write them, are not going to do a lot for you. So in this file, let's go and take a look at yellow, spelling error. Of course, this should be yellow, zip, and take a look at what we have. Here's our material, and there's some other node goodness. This one for the moment we ignore. Here is a mapping mode that defines how much I would like this texture to tile. Here I load the texture and put this into the multiply into the displacement. So how does this texture actually look? Let's take a look. So you see this black and white image I'm going to use and tell the software simply use that one as a helper to create this bump effect. Now I have some other loaded. So for example, I can have a hexagon shape. That's this one. Or for example, perforated. Looks like dots. Now before we continue, I have to explain something. This is really important. This is a seamless texture. You see, this missing part is on the other side. This triangular tip is actually this missing part down here. So if I take an image, copy and paste it, move it to the left or the right or up and down, you will later not see where the different tiles are. So that's why we call it seamless. Here, see, this half is here, that one that's missing. This distance plus this distance is equal this distance. Let's take a look at the perforated, how that one looks. Yeah, similar. So you see like the corners are all different. So when we multiply this one in Photoshop, let's say 9 tiles, you would not see where one tile would be. Again, that's what we call a seamless texture. Now if we go to Safari and for example type in seamless texture, yeah, they say they're seamless, but if we tile them, they're totally noticeable. For example here, this one might be more seamless. So let's maybe call for seamless metal. Now those are scratch patterns. Seamless metal pattern. Let's take a look for that. Oh, there, look, this one is pretty good. There you can see that as well. View image. So all those are seamless. See if you would tile them, that will work. So you can find a lot of those textures actually online if you don't want to create them by hand, because sometimes it takes some time to build those, and you can do this in Photoshop or in Illustrator, and all you need again is just black and white, and then you're good. See, this for example would not be seamless because actually here something is missing, and that's not here, and there's also like a highlight on it. If we would tile this one, you would immediately see it. Okay, let's go back to here, and I'm going to pass out those textures to you to play with. Let's maybe go back to the circular. So this mapping, that basically I'm going to use to decide the tiling along the X, along the Y, along the Z axis. It's going to multiply tile it. Now this group here, if I press tab, you see this. Somebody at a forum actually created this one for me. It's basically a math representation of how to create vectors to take this image and wrap it on a cylindrical projection around it. If you ask me if I know how to do this, I don't. This is way beyond my level of math. And again, that's the reason why I really like forums a lot. If something you don't know, simply ask. Maybe somebody's willing to do it for you, share it. And that's what he did. I'm really helpful about it. Yeah, thankful. Personally, I always use a different approach to project textures on objects, but for your level, I would like to use an old school cylindrical projection, which works pretty well for certain aspects, but also has its drawbacks. So I'm going to show you now what I mean with drawback. And instead of to the bump, I'm putting this one now into the texture. Let's take a look. And oh, this should be the circular there. Now there you can actually see this looks nice and roundish. This looks aggish. And that's simply because we are squeezing the cylinder. So we're squeezing the maximum surface to glue this texture over. So logically it's going to be pinched. And then there where we have more surface, we don't have that stretch. Unfortunately, that is also in computer graphics with the cylindrical projection simply a problem. We have to live with it. In next semester, when we go more into advanced rendering, I will show you a different workflow. But again, like I said before, when you start learning all the stuff, it's still okay. And sometimes also for a quick representation, that's a sufficient tool to use. And as long as your object, for example, is not very distorted, no, you might not even really see it. So for example, here right now, if I go into a side view, I can see that along this axis they're a little bit stretched. So let's see maybe if I could fix this. Nope. Oh, look at there. 1.5. 1.4. There. See, I de-stressed the surface, I scaled it, so it will be projected over it in a good way. And you see also on top, then when you have a cap, that's going to fail because we project it like a cylinder around it and not glue it over the surface. But for the rest, actually, this all works fantastic. And you see I only needed to change a little bit of the stuff. Okay, so let's actually see how we can do this inside my model. So here we are inside my scene. I put actually this part onto a different layer. So I can turn that layer off and simply focus on rendering that part. Everything will be a little bit faster. So what I'm going to do first is maybe select this object, and I'm just deleting the entry for the material. That's okay, no problem. And let's go to File, Append. Here's this folder of, not folder, blend file materials. And then here I have material, and for example, yellow plastic bump, cylinder image, append. Click the object, click this one. Okay. And let's take a look at what we have. And that looks pretty interesting. Okay. But let's start really completely from scratch. So I'm going to give you this material so you can copy and paste it. The thing for you that's really important for the texturing at the beginning is have this, this, and this, and I set here everything to 1. Okay, so let's go to the web. And let's see if we find somewhere something interesting maybe to start working with. And you know what? Maybe this is squarish. I'm going to download this image right now. So download file, just to my desktop. Okay. I just got an URL. Let's do it this way. Save image as. There. Okay. Let's go back to Blender. Okay. I go to open. There is that image. Open. And then I drag this one in. So for the moment I can see how this image looks like. And not really ideal. Let's say we go maybe 2 and see what happens. 2. Oh, okay. 2, 1. Doesn't really look very good. And the main reason is the clue is here. I have my object selected. I am in local. And this is one of the limitations of those cylindrical projection tools. The cylinder grows along Z, but my object is oriented, the mesh, along Y. But that's a really easy fix. So in object mode, I select this object, go to tab, select everything, rotate along 3D cursor. I also, with this object selected in object mode, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I press RX 90, yeah, in this case 90. Oh, and look, you see the texture immediately works. So there you see it. There. So the moment when I start rotating this, you see how this gets kind of confused. Okay. And now I have to see how I can change the orientation. So this degree minus 90, and I moved it back. Okay, perfect. So I hope this made a little bit sense. So I went into edit mode, oriented the mesh, and then moved in object mode everything back, because the mapping uses the object Z direction. And there we have it. Now, for example, I have a handle that's using some sort of a scale texture. Looks very leathery, for example. So it's pretty nice. Okay. Let me undo everything and and then I'm going to do everything one more time so you see what I was doing. Let's say everything looks like this in your case. So step 1, select your object, local, and then you see where is the Z. And you see it is right at this point there. That's my object center. So then you go Shift S, snap cursor to selected, and you see this 3D cursor snaps to it. Then you go into edit mode, set pivot point to 3D cursor. You see my 3D widget moves to there. And then this is X. So I can now RX minus 90. Okay, plus 90. So no minus, just 90. Press minus again, enter. Now my mesh is oriented along the Z-axis, but I would like to rotate the whole object back minus 90 degrees because I meshed my I rotated my mesh 90 degrees. And then here I can simply type in, remove the D, minus 90, and there I am. And there was it. And then, for example, I can play with those values here and see if maybe I would like to scale things a little bit. There you see, based on how I scale it, I get different effects or distortions or stretches. So let's maybe go back to here. Now this of course doesn't work. And let's see, do we have maybe, I don't know. Maybe let's give this one a try. And it has some stuff in it, but this is not good. And this has a reflection in it. That's not really usable. Nope, then it has some other stuff in it. So you have to really get good black and white images. Oh, look at this one. And this actually could do it. Looks, it is seamless maybe. Let's see. Save as. And there. Open. And let's take a look. Maybe 2. And 2. And is this really seamless or does it just look seamless? I'm not sure yet. Yeah, I guess it is seamless. I don't really see anywhere straight lines. Okay. No, and then zip, take this one out in there and into displacement. And now we have another structural effect. And you see, it's basically then really coming down to finding the correct material or image, and that's all you have to do. So this is actually really pretty easy. If, for example, you want to do something like leather, we could maybe look for leather texture seamless. And nope. This maybe, yeah, that maybe could help. Nope, there's text in it. Yeah, let's try this one. View, save as, desktop, open, and let's see. Maybe I have to change the scale. Yeah, it's too big. Not really seeing that effect right now. So let's turn off the bump and just see the color. Oh, there it is actually. So the thing is really there. Maybe a little bit too small, so artificially I blow this one up. Put this one back in. And maybe because this texture is so soft, I maybe have to change the strength. Make the effect a little bit stronger. Oh, see there. Now you get the skin-like look. And no, if this is leather, this has to be glossy with a blurriness to it. Okay. I hope this one actually now gave you a good answer to how to do texture mapping of a cylindrical object with using an image map. And again, how to do the mapping, I'm not going to explain because honestly I don't even know the answer myself. Somebody from Berlin, Germany just did it for me. And this trick simply simulates wrapping a texture around just a cylindrical object. If this one would arc, it wouldn't work. For that we would have to use a different approach, which I mainly use, UV unwrapping. But that's a little bit more complex and I would like to keep that one for a later project.